Have you ever wondered why Black Americans don't say African countries owe us some reparations? Have you ever questioned why they only ask white Americans, why America only has to pay for reparations when African countries were just as complicit, if not more, in the slave trade? I've asked that over and over and over, especially as I grew in knowledge. So I took a trip to Sierra Leone. Some of you may remember the movie Blood Diamond. Well, I was there before Blood Diamond was filmed. And it's interesting because I went to the same diamond mines and did the same thing that the movie did, looking for diamonds. I found them, brought a couple back, brought a few rough diamonds back. That was in 1990. No, that was in 2004, 2003, 2004, something like that. But anyway, I picked up this book. The title is right there. It's A New History of Sierra Leone by Joe A.D. Alley. And I was asking the guy that was selling the books which one I should get. And I flipped to the couple pages, read to them. And I was asking people in Sierra Leone if they were ever taught about the slave trade. And they said, yes, they were. And this was a book that was used in their educational system. And that's why I picked it up. So I picked it up and I'm going to read a few paragraphs out of here. So this paragraph is how trade was conducted. We're talking about the slave trade here. Coastal rulers had welcomed the European traders in the hope that they too would benefit from the trade. So they arranged that all major transactions should be carried out only on the coast. And I should back up and say that in the paragraph before this, there were 4 Afro-British families that were in the slave trade. So these coastal rulers saw how much monies was being made by these 4 families, and they wanted in on the trade. Back to the reading. So these coastal rulers, they arranged that all major trade transactions should be carried out only on the coast. The European trader was therefore forbidden to go into the interior to trade and had to pay rents and other tribute to the coastal rulers for permission to trade. Now I'm going to stop there and explain this. European traders weren't allowed to go into the interior of the African countries or the African areas that were there and controlled by these tribal leaders. It was up to the tribal leaders. That's the deal that the tribal leaders made, that they would go into the interior, they would capture people and then sell them. So let me continue. The ruler was the trader's landlord, and the trader became the ruler's stranger. The landlord was responsible for his stranger's security as well as his actions. All right? So the coastal ruler decided how the stranger, the European, would act. He also guarded him. told him what he could and could not do. So they were even more complicit by going into the interior to grab up people from different tribes, conquer them, and then sell them. And yet, African Americans and these groups are bent on totally putting the blame on white America and giving a pass to African tribes. You tell me how that is. And that is the reason that I say when I'm asked, I'm an American. I'm an American. And then if they have any questions after that, they can ask me. But damn it, I'm an American, because that's the country that FBAs know. So getting back to the reading, as trade developed, more European goods were exchanged for ivory, beeswax, cowhide, camwood, some gold, and slaves. Some dishonest traders, like John Hawkins, had tried to kidnap slaves and run away with them. See, in order to discourage this bad practice, coastal rulers began to demand hostages of ships' crew as an insurance against ungentlemanly conduct by European slave traders. So John Hawkins, a European, said, I'm going to try and cut out the middleman. So he went in there, he started to try to kidnap slaves. And guess what the coastal rulers said? Oh, no. That's not going to work. We're going to hold all of your ship's crew as insurance. So if any of you go into the interior, try to kidnap slaves, people to enslave them, we're going to start doing away with your crew. And as I read a little bit further, what you will find is that if they were caught, they then became enslaved. Further reading. When BRAC, which is the British company, withdrew from Sierra Leone, their fort on Bruce Island, or Bunce Island, was taken over by the London firm of Grant, Sargent, and Oswald in 1750. The firm established a shipyard, employed more African workers, and assembled a fleet of small vessels to ply the southern coastline in search of slaves. Most of the slaves bought by the company were taken to South Carolina in North American colonies to be resold to rice planters in Charleston and other rice growing centers from South Carolina, for it was soon discovered that slaves from Sierra Leone and its neighborhood were very good rice growers. So my family is from South Carolina. Both my mother and father's side are from South Carolina. If you've ever been to the coastal areas, it's very much the same as the coastal areas of West Africa, in which rice was a main crop. So they found out that people in that area were great rice farmers. They captured them in order to take them back to then create plantations, put them on plantations where rice was being grown. Reading further, Danish merchants also became interested in Bunce Island. Today, one can still find a cannon from the Danish ship dated 1780 and the grave of a Danish ship captain who died in 1783. There was money to be made by anyone who could bring slaves from Sierra Leone to South Carolina. It has been suggested that descendants of slaves from Sierra Leone and its neighborhood gave birth to a distinctive group of Black Americans in South Carolina and Georgia, who today are called Gullah. This is a book by a Sierra Leonean who understands and did research to show that the people in South Carolina were called Gullah. Reading on, the Gullah language reflects significant influences from Sierra Leone and the surrounding areas. The Gullah speak a variant of Creole, like other descendants of slaves in the Caribbean. So one of the names that I like for my mixed, multi-generationally mixed peoples is the name Creole. And this is spelled K-R-I-O, not C-R-E-O-L-E-S, like that used in New Orleans, in Louisiana. So Kriols, the language was spoken in Sierra Leone, and the peoples that were brought to the Carolinas spoke Creole. I like Creole as a name. We should, if we were to get a name back on the census, I like Creole. I don't want to necessarily step on New Orleans peoples or Louisiana people that consider themselves Creole, but Creole is a term that would be very specific to multi-generationally mixed Americans, as well as those who are even currently mixed. But Creole doesn't have any negative connotations, and that's why I like the term Creole. Continuing on. They use Sierra Leonean rural names like Vandy, Ndapi, Sinai, Tamba, and Kadiwitu, Fatima, Hawa, Isata. They also make baskets, fishnets, which are very similar to those made in rural areas of Sierra Leone. So you see the culture that was taken from the Sierra Leone area and then brought to South Carolina and Georgia. And for some reason, Creole, even in South Carolina, peoples were called brass ankles. That was one of the names used for those who were mixed of European and African ancestries. So here's another, let me read this also. This talks about the Maine invasion. The Maine hailed from the Mali Empire. The leader, Queen Marasico, had offended the emperor and had to leave the city. She took along large numbers of followers and moved southwards. These followers were later transformed into a conquering army which overran vast territories in many nations. These armies' ranks swelled. Next paragraph. On reaching the Atlantic coast, Marasico and her troops traveled westward. The Maine finally based in the Cape Mount area of Liberia, close to the eastern Sierra Leone frontier, by 1540s. At Cape Mount, they had a serious battle with the Boulogne, in which Masarico's son running into a balloon ambush, was killed. Queen Masariko died shortly afterwards from grief and old age. The Maine later conquered the Timney, and by 1555, they had succeeded in subduing the coastal communities. Listen, Black Americans have to understand that they should consider themselves, in my estimation, American first. Yeah, I know that the slave trade was very, it was bad. Whippings, hangings, rapes, and everything else. I understand that. But to not lay blame where a huge part of the blame should be on those African coastal rulers is a mistake. So when you're asking for reparations, FBAs, ADOS, you should also be requesting it from those countries in Africa that participated in the enslavement, in the trade. Because without them, there would not have been any Africans, any Americans of African descent in the United States, or for that matter, in the Americas. So when Ghana says, we want you to come back, you should say to Ghana, no, why don't you give us some money? Because you say you're going to give us land and cash. Why don't you just give us all cash? Because we know that Africans coming over here in current day like to come over here and say that Black Americans have no culture. Black Americans are dumb. Black Americans haven't created anything. So the same mental thought process that those rulers had is the same mental process and thoughts that these Africans from Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Ethiopia, Uganda, South Africa, it's the same mentality they come over. But what do? They want to say, oh, we're minority. And in fact, we're African American minorities. Therefore, we should be able to take advantage of affirmative action. And I'm not going to get too heavy into this, but affirmative action should only be used for those Black Americans, African Americans of foundational Black American and ADOS heritage. That's what the law was for. It's time Americans of Black descent, including us, MGMs, Kriols, mixed and mulattoes, take part in. We have to push the envelope. And this is to my multi-generationally mixed family. We need to get our category back on the census. And I say this as it would help our Black American cousins in their effort. And there are only two categories. One category of people that should ever be getting any type of advantage from affirmative action when it comes to race. and that is Black Americans. The rest of you got an affirmative action when you stepped your ass onto this country's soil, when you were let in here to live a better life. That's all you get. It's time you stop taking up slots in universities, taking up slots in companies, etc., claiming that you are discriminated against. That's not what affirmative action was for. FBAs, ADOS, turn your anger to where it should be and add African countries to that anger for reparations.